Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into one of the most fascinating, complex, and, frankly, deeply contested places on Earth. We're going to unpack a pretty incredible paradox: how ancient history, stuff that's been buried deep underground for literally millennia, is actively fueling modern geopolitical conflicts right now.
Okay, let's dive right into this. It's a really simple but profoundly important question. When we dig up the past, do those ancient artifacts give us absolute, undeniable truths? Or do they kind of always require human interpreters to actually give them meaning? I mean, can stones actually speak for themselves?
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this absolute collision of the past and the present. You're looking at a proposed modern cable car system that's designed to run right over Jerusalem's Historic Basin. It's this ancient, incredibly sacred landscape coming face to face with massive modern tourism infrastructure. And honestly, this perfectly sets the stage for the deep tensions we're about to explore today. So here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll be unearthing ancient Jerusalem, looking at the proof of indigeneity, examining archaeology as a political strategy, the fierce debate over King David's palace, tunnels and tourism, and finally, interpreting the stones. Let's unpack the evidence, shall we?
Kicking things off with Section 1, Unearthing Ancient Jerusalem. The sheer massive scale of the excavations happening in the Historic Basin right now is just staggering, and it's physically reshaping reality on the ground.
Which brings us to Section 2, the proof of indigeneity. See, from the perspective of the Israeli state and right-wing groups, these massive excavations aren't just some academic curiosity. Not at all. They're seen as definitive proof of a deep, undeniable connection and an indigenous right to the land.
Just look at this quote up here from Miri Regev, Israel's Minister of Culture, talking about a massive excavation project. She explicitly says, "These excavations revive the Old Testament and strengthen our greatest kashon, or possession title." So you can clearly see how political figures are directly linking these archaeological finds to modern territorial legitimacy. And expanding on this, IDF Major Doron Spielman recently wrote a book arguing this exact point. He asserts that the archaeology reveals a 3,800-year history that definitively proves Jewish indigeneity. He points to some truly incredible discoveries, like a pure golden bell found in an ancient drainage channel that still has its chime intact from the Second Temple period. For Spielman and others in this camp, these physical items are utilized as direct evidence to combat opposing historical narratives and push back against international rulings, like UNESCO's 2016 resolution, which they view as outright historical denialism.
Let's move to Section 3 and see how this builds, because there is a very strong counter-perspective coming from left-wing NGOs who monitor this archaeology closely.
Take a group like Emek Shaveh. They see these excavations through a completely different lens. They argue that there's an intentional political strategy at play here. As you can see, they state the goal is transforming Jerusalem's historic basin from a multicultural historic city to a series of tourist attractions shaped by a Judeo-centric narrative. They essentially argue that heritage is being weaponized by settler movements like the Alad Foundation, who manage these key archaeological sites, prioritizing a single historical narrative over all the others.
So, the crucial point is this stark visual contrast we have right here. On one side, you have the ideological promise of unearthing 3,800 years of indigenous heritage, but on the other side, the very tangible human price. Imagine the anxiety for the 700 Palestinians living in the Batan al-Hawa neighborhood who are currently risking eviction due to legal battles tied directly to these heritage and settlement projects.
Moving into Section 4, the debate over King David's palace. To really anchor this pretty abstract political debate, let's zoom in on one very specific, highly controversial spot located right inside the city of David.
It is absolutely wild how top archaeologists can look at the exact same pile of rocks and draw completely different conclusions. Dr. Elet Mazar excavated this large stone structure and declared, "This is it, the 10th century BCE Palace of King David." But then, other prominent academics like Amihai Mazar and Avraham Faust look at the ceramics found there and say, nope, actually, it's a Jebusite fortress from before David even conquered the city. And if that wasn't enough, yet another group, including Israel Finkelstein, argues it's not even a single structure at all, but just layers of fortifications built over hundreds of years. The academic science here is fiercely debated. But, and this is important, here's where the unreliable narrator dynamic comes in. If you visit this site today as a tourist, the signage and the leaflets proudly highlight the King David's palace theory as fact. They barely, if at all, mention the massive academic debate surrounding it. The site's curation basically spoon-feeds a highly specific, one-dimensional perspective directly to the public, completely bypassing the scientific controversy.
All right, Section 5, Tunnels, Tourism, and Tensions. Let's briefly shift our focus from the ancient stones themselves to the modern infrastructure that is rapidly changing the entire landscape of the Historic Basin, both above and below the ground.
Does map out the rapid acceleration of these projects on this timeline. In 2005, excavations heavily accelerated for a comprehensive vision known as the Shalom Plan. By 2017, massive tourism projects like the cable car and the huge Kedem Visitor Center got the green light. Then in 2018, the Elad Foundation was actually given an operational role at the Davidson Center, an archaeological park right by the Western Wall. The momentum of this situation is just relentless.
Now, to truly immerse yourself in the sheer scale of the whole shebang, you have to look underground. You are looking at massive horizontal tunnel excavations happening right beneath Palestinian homes in the Silwan neighborhood. This is an immense, incredibly controversial engineering effort aimed at excavating a Roman street they've dubbed the Pilgrim's Trail. And when tourists finally visit, this is what they are presented with: an imagined, polished reconstruction of that Roman street. Notice how it perfectly curates a very specific Second Temple period experience of Jewish pilgrimage. But what's missing? It completely omits any visual narrative of later historical periods. And crucially, it ignores the present-day Palestinian village sitting right above it.
Which brings us to our final section, interpreting the stones. Let's take a step back, synthesize all this, and look at the philosophical reality of these discoveries.
And this brilliantly illustrates a core truth that reviewers of these archaeological claims often point out. Stones require interpretation, and interpretation involves human judgment, cultural context, and scholarly debate. Archaeological evidence, no matter how spectacular a golden bell or a massive stone structure might be, it never truly speaks for itself without a human proxy stepping in to give it a voice.
So, I'll leave you with this final, lingering thought to close out our explainer today. If the stones can't actually speak for themselves, who ultimately gets the power to tell their story? The intersection of hard science and human narrative is incredibly powerful, and right now in Jerusalem, it is shaping the future just as much as it's revealing the past. Thank you so much for joining me, and as always, keep questioning the history you see.